Hello, I am Emily Rhodes, and this month I'm here to talk to you about James Baldwin's Giovanni's Room. This is the June pick for Emily's Walking Book Club. For those of you who don't know, we are a walking book club. That means we walk and talk about a book every month. We meet on a Sunday to walk on Hampstead Heath and talk about the book. And we also now meet on Fridays in Regent's Park. And if you aren't based in London and kind of can't come along to our walks, we also have a Monday evening Zoom and a weekly newsletter with loads of info about the book, and online discussion threads too. So really it's a community. I've tried to make it as inclusive as I can. I'm super open to more ideas of ways to connect. So do tell me if you have any great ideas about how to be part of this community and you feel you can't currently connect with us. So Giovanni's Room, there it is again. I have chosen it this June partly because it's a great book, partly because June is Pride Month, and I think it's a really good and important time to celebrate this landmark work of gay writing. So James Baldwin, for those of you who don't know, was a Black American writer, writing began in the 50s. His first book, Go Tell It on the Mountain, was very much about being a boy preacher in Harlem, which was quite a kind of black experience, although he did write it living in Paris. And it was a success. And when he wrote this book, Giovanni's Room, which is not, it doesn't feature any black characters, his publisher and agent actually didn't want it. They advised him against it. They wanted to change it. They wanted him to write more of a kind of classic black tale, another Harlem story. So good for James Baldwin for saying, no, sticking to his guns, saying I want to write this book, the book I want to write. And in the end, he actually published it with a smaller publisher, but preserved its integrity. So it's interesting that from the off, the question of prejudice is like right there. Why should he have to only write about black experience? And also it's interesting in this great introduction by Carol Phillips, he says, he quotes James Baldwin's response to an interview where he says, James Baldwin made plain his feelings about the connectivity between race and sexuality. And so then this is James Baldwin's words. The sexual question and the racial question have always been entwined, If Americans can mature on the level of racism, then they have to mature on the level of sexuality. So this is the kind of other argument that actually the books aren't different. They aren't kind of disruptive. He isn't following a different path in what he's writing about. He's writing about minorities and prejudice. And if you're writing about a black life, writing about a gay life is sort of the next step in that journey. It's just another journey about minorities who suffer prejudice rather than only taking the slice of black experience. Which I think is really, really interesting and sort of brings up a point that I feel I often come back to, which is that yes, some people unfortunately do suffer more prejudice than others, but actually prejudice is something that, although I'm sure we're all guilty of, to some extent, even if that is an unconscious bias, it is also something that I think from which most of us have suffered, whether that is ageism or sexism or some other assumption that people make about you and therefore discriminate against you, and makes it even more important to read books and perhaps especially kind of important, not important but rewarding, and we can really empathize with people who suffer from prejudice, whether they are black or gay, even though I'm neither of those things, I still feel like I kind kind of get what the main character in this book is feeling. I hope it's okay to say that. Okay, so I actually set up to record this outside on our terrace, but unfortunately, living on a terrace, it was so incredibly noisy outside. There were sort of builders, 2 gardens along, window cleaners, a house along, all this sort of drilling and chatting and phones ringing. So I had to come inside to my little room of my own, which actually is rather apt because this is Giovanni's room, this book. And it is a kind of totally weird coincidence that it comes just a couple of months after we discussed this book. The L-Shaped Room, another room book, a really great room book. And I'm so sad that Lynne Reid Banks died. I mean, literally a few weeks after we discussed this. I really wish I'd written to her to tell her that we'd chosen it, but never mind. So these 2 room books, and here we are in my room. And of course it has made me think again about rooms and how important they are and what they have to say about ourselves. Why can they be places of sanctuary, or places of oppression, or somehow both? Can you have one without the other? And yeah, well, do check out my little webcast about the L-Shaped Room if you'd like, because that might be an interesting point of comparison, and it is a really good book. But I thought I'd read out a little bit here. About 3 pages, 2.5 pages, that describes Giovanni's room, so we get a feeling of this place, which is in Paris in the 50s. I scarcely know how to describe that room. It became, in a way, every room I had ever been in, and every room I find myself in hereafter will remind me of Giovanni's room. I did not really stay there very long. We met before the spring began, and I left there during the summer, but it still seems to me that I spent a lifetime there. Life in that room seemed to be occurring underwater, as I say, and it is certain that I underwent a sea change there. To begin with, the room was not large enough for 2. It looked out on a small courtyard. Looked out means only that the room had 2 windows, against which the courtyard malevolently pressed, encroaching day by day, as though it had confused itself with the jungle. We, or rather Giovanni, kept the windows closed most of the time. He had never bought any curtains, neither did we buy any while I was in the room. To ensure privacy, Giovanni had obscured the window panes with a heavy white cleaning polish. We sometimes had children playing outside our window. Sometimes strange shapes loomed against it. At such moments, Giovanni, working in the room or lying in the bed, would stiffen like a hunting dog and remain perfectly silent until whatever seemed to threaten our safety had moved away. I'm just going to pause there for a moment because there's a mention of a dog, and I'm thinking of Alfie, who is down here, not stiffened, fast asleep. But it is amazing when you see him kind of ears prick up and he stiffens at the sound of something, often a cat, which he's rather terrified of. He had always had great plans for remodelling this room, and before I arrived he had already begun. One of the walls was a dirty, streaked white, where he had torn off the wallpaper. The wall facing it was destined never to be uncovered, and on this wall a lady in a hoop skirt and a man in knee breeches perpetually walked together, hemmed in by roses. The wallpaper lay on the floor in great sheets and scrolls and dust. On the floor also lay our dirty laundry, along with Giovanni's tools and the paintbrushes and the bottles of oil and turpentine. Our suitcases teetered on top of something, so that we dreaded ever having to open them, and sometimes went without some minor necessities such as clean socks for days. No one ever came to see us, except Jacques, and he did not come often. We were far from the centre of the city, and we had no phone. I remember the first afternoon I woke up there, with Giovanni fast asleep beside me, heavy as a fallen rock. The sun filtered through the room so faintly that I was worried about the time. I stealthily lit a cigarette, for I did not want to wake Giovanni. I did not yet know how I would face his eyes. I looked about me. Giovanni had said something in the taxi about his room being very dirty. I'm sure it is, I had said lightly, and turned away from him, looking out of the window. Then we had both been silent. When I woke up in his room, I remembered that there had been something strained and painful in the quality of that silence, which had been broken when Giovanni said, with a shy, bitter smile, I must find some poetic figure. And he spread his heavy fingers in the air as though a metaphor were tangible. I watched him. Look at the garbage of this city, he said finally, and his fingers indicated the flying street. All of the garbage of the city. Where do they take it? I don't know where they take it, but it might very well be my room. It's much more likely, I said, that they dump it into the Seine. But I sensed when I woke up and looked around the room the bravado and the cowardice of his figure of speech. This was not the garbage of Paris, which would have been anonymous. This was Giovanni's regurgitated life. Okay, I think I'll stop there. So, in case you didn't gather from that, this book is about Giovanni, who is a young Italian working in a bar, man who's working in a bar in Paris. And the person telling the story is David, who is an American, who is gay and is not... Well, he feels incredibly ashamed of his sexuality. He's not open about it. He's not out. He recalls his kind of shameful moment of awakening, sexual awakening in America. And in Paris, he's sort of, I think, running away from quite an oppressive father. His mother is dead, and he actually has these terrible nightmares about her, where she's this kind of ghoulish figure. And his fiancée, Hella, who's also American, has gone off on holiday travelling around Spain, and he's left in Paris. I say she's his fiancée, but it feels like they're quite whimsically affianced. And he's left in Paris and meets and falls for Giovanni, and they kind of go into Giovanni's room, and you really feel they're very cloistered there from... not just from Paris, he says they've got no phone, they're far out. It's also this image of the windows being covered by the cleaning polish. It's so enclosed, it's so private. They're kind of trying to make their own world there because David can't see how he can live in the wider world in that way. It also begins, this book, with the knowledge that Giovanni is about to be executed and that David's fiancée Hella has left him. So we know that this has got a very sad ending. Time is doing something quite weird in the book. So it's an incredibly tragic story, but I think it's also, there is some hope in there, and I think so much of the tragedy of this book comes from this shame and the secrecy that comes around it, this fact that it all has to happen in this room that feels very oppressive. And I mean, reading around this book, it feels like so many people who are gay come to this book when they're teenagers and sort of find themselves in it. And I think it is such an argument for being true to yourself and not being ashamed, for not being cloistered in a room away, and opening the door and being open to the world and coming out, literally. I think there is hope there, but it is a powerfully dark and intense and quite miserable sort of read. It kind of puts you through the ringer as you read it. But I am longing to know what you make of it. Do come along on our walks, or find out more, or drop me an email. All the information is on emily'swalkingbookclub.substack.com, and I can't wait to hear your thoughts about this brilliant book of gay writing. Thanks.